today we're doing one of my favorite topics, equivalent fractions. Our first section is what is an equivalent fraction. Our second is how to form an equivalent fraction. Our third is cancelling a fraction down into its simplest form. And 4, it's exploration. So, what is an equivalent fraction? Imagine that we have my chocolate bar here. So this is John's chocolate bar, and we can divide it into 4, and we could also divide it into 8 pieces. If I were to eat a quarter of this chocolate bar, that would be the same as eating 2/8 of the chocolate bar. Equivalent means the same, therefore this fraction here, 1/4, is the same as 2/8. Thus we get the name equivalent fraction. Well, first of all, let's go into how to form an equivalent fraction. So we can form an equivalent fraction either by multiplying or dividing. And we'd multiply both the numerator and the denominator of the fraction. So for instance, in this example here, if we got a half and we times both the numerator and the denominator by 2, you need to do the same thing to both. You get an equivalent fraction. So if you were to times 1 by 2, you get 2. If you times 2 by 2, you get 4. See, the hard maths. So this makes the fraction probably a little slightly more difficult to understand when you've got it higher. So 2/4 might be slightly harder to understand than a half. If you were to divide this fraction by, let's say, 2, and divide this fraction by 2, you can actually cancel it down from 8/16 into a simpler equivalent fraction. So if I were to divide 8 by 2, we'd get 4. And then if I divide 16 by 2, we get 8. If I wanted, I could keep going. I could keep dividing by anything that goes into these two numbers exactly. So if I divide 4 by 2, then I'd get 2 over 4. And I mean, I could keep going if I wanted. I could divide that by 2 and I get 1 over 2. Usually, however, when we cancel down a fraction, we want to put it in its simplest terms. So you often see a question that will ask for a fraction in its simplest terms. Let's just walk through an example here. So we've got 12 over 16. Well, let's work out how to write this in its simplest terms. First of all, we're going to think of the factors of 12 and then the factors of 16. So I like to group them in pairs because that's a lot easier to do. So the factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Okay. And then if we look at our factors of 16, it's 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Because 4 times 4 is 16. It's a square number. Okay. So we've got our factors. Now we've got to find our highest common factor. Our highest common factor, sometimes called the HCF. So highest common factor. If you ever see HCF, that's what it means, highest common factor. We look at both of our groups of factors here and our groups of factors here, and then we need to find the highest number that is a factor of both numbers. Now you can see 1 and 1 are common, but that doesn't help us cancel anything down. So 1 will always be a common factor, but it doesn't help us cancel anything down. 2 and 2 is a factor, getting better, but we can go even better than that. We've got 4 and 4, the highest common factor. So what we do, once we find our highest common factor, is we divide both of our numbers by 4. So both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. And we get, so 12 divided by 4 is 3. And then 16 divided by 4 is 4. Let's explore this idea a little further with a sort of exam style question. Write down three equivalent fractions of 3/4. So in this one, because 3/4 is already in its simplest form, what we need to do is multiply. So if I want to write 3/4 as an equivalent fraction, all I need to do is multiply both the numerator and denominator by any number. So I could times this by 2 and this by 2. And if I times 3 by 2, I get 6. If I times 4 by 2, I get 8. Okay, we can also do, let's do 3 over 4, and then let's multiply them by 5. So I'm going to multiply 3 by 5 and 4 by 5. If I multiply 3 by 5, I get 15. If I multiply 4 by 5, I get 20. Okay, and then let's do 3 over 4, and let's times each of these by 10. Okay, so 3 times 10 is 30, and 4 times 10 is 40. So those are our 3 answers here. So we've got 6 over 8, 15 over 20, and 30 over 40. And they're all equivalent fractions of 3/4. Let's look at the second one. With this one, it's got simplify 45 over 50. So in this case, we've got to cancel the fraction down into its simplest terms, which means we've got to find the highest common factor of both 45 and 50. The highest common factor is 5. Okay, 5 is our highest common factor. So if we divide 45 by 5, we get 9. If we divide 50 by 5, we get 10. Therefore, our fraction in its simplest terms is 9 over 10. Thanks for watching. Join us next time where we'll be adding and subtracting fractions with different denominators.